In the early 1940s, Stephen Von Euw was the editor of the Rockville Journal newspaper. When the war began, the journal's management decided to send the paper free of charge to local service personnel no matter where they were posted. Von Euw encouraged those in the service and those waiting at home to submit their news to his popular What's Hot column in the journal. During the war, personal letters and government press releases supplied content for the column. Time and again, readers at home and in the service praised the What's Hot column for keeping them informed about people and events within the community, as well as about friends and classmates scattered around the world. In 1943, the director of the War Records Department of the Connecticut State Library sent a letter to all editors of local newspapers asking them to save a wide range of war-related materials. As requested, Von Euw saved personal letters, photographs, and postcards, as well as press releases, posters, and other documents relating to World War II. After Stephen Von Euw's death in 1955, this collection remained in his home in Rockville, Connecticut. After his daughter Ruth died in 2008, the collection was donated to the Vernon Historical Society. Volunteers have sorted, cataloged, and preserved this wonderful archive. The following letters provide samples of the experiences of a few that reflect the reality of the many who served in the armed forces during the Second World War. Throughout the war, volunteers and draftees traveled to training camps in the United States before heading to their wartime assignments. For most of the soldiers from Rockville and Vernon, this was the first time they had been out of Connecticut or out of New England. Several letter writers marveled at the vastness and beauty of the country. Some writers mentioned that they had encountered other Rockville natives. Reaction to camp life depended on the location, temperature, and activities.
I'm at the West Coast now, the place El Toro Field, near Santa Ana and about 40 miles from Los Angeles. Hollywood is in that vicinity too. It's Glamourland. We were quarantined for scarlet fever for the first few days. After examinations, we were released, but during our time of isolation, we had to live in tents, much to our dismay, because the nights are really cold around here. During the day, however, it becomes quite warm and we wore our khaki or our work dungarees. Facilities for our convenience are plenty. The base has a big PX and leatherneck club where we can get sodas, sundaes, sandwiches, coffee, milk, beer, and etc. It also has a library, reading and lounging rooms, tailor, barber, theater, boxing ring, athletic fields, and on and on. One thing we are happy about the most, though, is the fact that Liberty will be swell because we have Los Angeles, Pasadena, and Hollywood so close.
Boy, wish I was in Rockville right now. The heat here is terrific. I won't say I like it either because it's really too warm. But I must say, the swimming couldn't be any better. And we have the nicest swimming pool too. But all in all, give me the good old North any day.
Liberty in California rates 4 stars. Speak of feminine cuties. Servicemen really get hip to the jive spoken by the females who greatly outnumber the males in this part of the country. I've been to the Hollywood Canteen, had lunch with Jackie Gleason and George Raft, toured the Republic and Universal Studios, and saw many of the screen's favorites. Being formerly the assistant manager of the Strand Theater in Hartford, I enjoyed the technical background involved in picture making during the tour of Universal Studios.
This is the hothouse of the country. We're all fine and ready for anything already. They train us fast, the eats are good, and so are the officers. No time off on all work. We learn the hard way around here. Plenty of KP. We all love it like hell. We sing while we drill and march the modern Army way.
Hello, folks. Yes, we are still in California, but are finally working in a defense place again. We really like the work. We see our husbands every other night now that they are back from the maneuvers.
Believe it or not, we are stationed at a baseball park. It was formerly the South Florida Fairgrounds. We live in one of the exposition buildings, and the mess hall is underneath the grandstand itself.
The sunny California climate has got me down. In the spring, a young man's fancy lightly turns to love. Well, our spring is like your summer at home. Everybody in good old Rockville ought to spend their winters here in California, but not anywhere near Camp Roberts. I've been transferred again, this time to the Every Soldier's Friend outfit. I mean, the MPs.
Not long ago, we passed the equator. All men who have not passed the equator are polywogs. All men who have are shellbacks, so now I'm a shellback. Of course, we had to take our initiation, but it wasn't so bad. We dressed up in all sorts of costumes before passing the equator and had a heck of a time.
I work in the Public Works Department, accounting section on payroll for civilian workers. Work starts at 0700 and ends at 1630. To stay awake after a Liberty night was a problem at first, but now it's no trouble at all. They have done everything to make the Waves happy here, giving us a recreation center with a uniform shop, quiet rooms, soda and beer bars, and a nice lounge. It has been said the Quonset Point is the country club of the Navy. Just by enlisted personnel, of course. Airplanes. When the weather is fine, that is all one can hear. You really miss the noise when you're away from here for a weekend. As a matter of fact, this is what puts us to sleep at night. Sometimes they come too close to the barracks for comfort. Guess maybe I'll have to live near an airport after the war in order to sleep at night.
To prepare for their wartime assignments, soldiers were sorted by abilities or background, then assigned to training classes. Some soldiers learned combat and survival skills. Others were taught to operate or maintain machinery, ranging from airplanes to tanks, trucks, ships, jeeps, and ambulances. Some learned how to use radios, cameras, or other technology. Others learned how to retrieve and care for the wounded. For many, their military education gave them new skills that would serve them in the post-war years.
I am at Texas Technological College as an aviation student preparing for training as an aviation cadet. The food is wonderful, and so are the living quarters. The discipline is, shall I say, rather rough, but for some reason or another I really like it. Academically, it isn't tough, with the exception of a thing called physics. The material is thrown at us really fast. I dropped a pencil and missed 2 weeks of work bending down to pick it up. Our physical training program is one of the toughest and most complete in the Army. The Army Air Forces are really building men. There are no softies in this crowd. Some of our fellows have started to fly. I expect to start sometime this month.
I'm in the 3rd week of school now, and I really like it so far. But as time goes on, I suppose it will get tougher. I'm in the truck driver school. First, you get 3 weeks of mechanics, in case you get a breakdown in the battle zone. You gotta know how things work. But it sure is interesting to see how things work inside a truck. Then, we go on blackout driving.
I received 2 weeks schooling at the Polaroid Course School in Vectography, or third-dimensional photography. It's the newest and best idea yet for giving pictures height, depth, and width. After completing the training, we returned to Cherry Point, and later I was transferred to the 3rd Marine Air Wing. I'm in Group 32, a fighter squadron consisting of Corsair fighters, a United Aircraft product. By the way, I used to work there on the propellers at one time. Now, Mom is working and helping build the engines for Pratt & Whitney. Kind of a cycle. There are 7 photographers attached to the group. One of my duties here is to stand a camera watch with the crash crew. In case of a crack-up, I take pictures of the damaged plane for damage verification and record for Washington.
I find that I can be busy all the time here, and then not have all my work done. I often think how I wasted time in civilian life. I sure could have used some of that time. Last week they took a group to the infiltration course. It was the longest 75 yards I ever had to crawl with machine guns with live ammunition. With every 4th shot a tracer flying over your head. It's quite an experience, let me tell you. It's a mental conditioning course. There are also mines exploding around you as you crawl.
The training is really something. It is not easy life, by no means, but after you get used to it, you feel 100% better. Everywhere we go, we march in sections, and getting everyone in step is really a job. You should see some of these small girls trying to take big steps. Today was our first captain's inspection. Our rooms had to be spotless, and all our gear was laid in a uniform manner on our bunks. Our knees were all shaking when the captain walked in. We all lived through it. I have all my uniforms now, but we won't be putting them on for a week. That should be a very proud day.
I'm in the communications branch of the tank destroyers. Have just 4 more weeks of basic training, after which I am in hopes of a furlough and a glimpse of the hometown. Training is tough at times, but that will all be to our advantage should we enter combat. We tank destroyers have played a major part in the Battle of North Africa and Sicily, and and have just made the headlines again this weekend in establishing a beachhead in Italy. I am proud to be a member of such a fine battalion.
Honestly, one can't conceive of the immensity of this place without spending a 3-day tour of the grounds. The Naval Hospital to which I am stationed for my internship is terrific. The winter bed capacity exceeds 5,000. Consequently, we interns have quite a load to carry. At present, I am on a 7-day-week schedule with a 24-hour duty every third night. I am indeed pleased with the hospital facilities here, and I am certain that the training here will prove to be of unlimited value in the future. Leading men from the various teaching medical centers in the vicinity are the heads of the departments. The patients sure do receive adequate care and attention here.
On September 9th, 1942, I was accepted as a Naval Aviation Cadet. On October 28th, 1942, I started my first 3 months with the Hartford Hornets at Chapel Hill Pre-Flight School in North Carolina. The next 3 months were spent at Memphis, Tennessee, flying the Yellow Perils. Since April 1943, my time was spent at Corpus Christi, Texas, where I flew the aircraft from land as well as water. Next came instructor school and the instructor duty here at Cavness Field. Most of the instruction here is rear cockpit, along with regular instruction to teach students how to fly. We have formation and night flying. After 4 to 5 months duty here, I may get instructor duty with the twin engines, and perhaps by then I'll know how to fly like the birds.
Soldiers riding home from a war zone had to be careful with the information they shared. Military censors reviewed letters and removed parts with sensitive information. Letter writers were safe in remarking on the ironies or amusements of military life and keeping their stories light for the folks at home. Many reflected on the contrast between war-torn areas and home, while others noted cultural differences among the countries they passed through.
It has been quite a while now since I have seen Rockville. The 6th of December will make 1 year and 4 months that we have been overseas. We have done quite a bit of traveling in that time. We have been to Scotland, Ireland, England, North Africa, and Sicily, now in Italy, and it wouldn't surprise me one bit if we went to some parts of Germany. The best place we have been so far was England. We have been in quite a few air raids since we've been overseas. Most of them were in North Africa. At one time, we have been so close to the front lines that you can hear the big old guns pounding away all night long and during the day too. I'd say that we were about 10 miles from the front line at the time. The Jerrys visited us from at least 2 to 3 times during the day, not counting the night trips.
The first impression one gets as he sees the island is a large coral reef with a large coconut plantation on it. The coconut trees are planted 25 feet apart. Due to the fact that there is a war going on and there are no natives doing the work, the ground is covered with nuts, which make it hard to walk around, especially at night. Off in the distance, there are a few mountains that are almost impossible to climb due to the fact that there are no trails around the jungle. I cannot and I will not try to tell you what the jungle looks like. Though you as well as many others have seen Tarzan pictures, I can say that even Tarzan could not do the things he does in the pictures. It is almost impossible to crawl through the underbush, let alone swing through the trees. At night, it is the most dangerous, not only from the wild game, but from the different sounds that anything or anybody can make. The first few nights are the worst. All the strange noises keep you awake, and you can see anything imaginable coming out the trees to attack you. After a short stay here, one gets used to all the strange sounds, but it makes one very nervous.
I'm on an island somewhere in the South Pacific. These islands are alright, have plenty of bananas, coconuts, and pineapples, so there isn't any chance to go hungry. The natives are good to us, but the darn mosquitoes aren't, and there are plenty of them too. Quite a few people asked me when I was home on my leaves what the USO did for us boys. Well, until I hit this place, I did not know much about it, but now I can speak with intelligence. They do not always have big-name stars in the program, but after you're out of the States, you don't care as long as you do see a stage show. Believe me, they've done a grand job. The Red Cross is also doing a good job. People at home can rest assured that the money they give us is being put to good use by those organizations.
Oh yes, I mustn't forget to mention that almost after 8 months, we had a fresh egg each. Boy, this was worth shouting about. One never knows how good an egg is until they can't get any for a long time. After we get settled, we should be getting a lot of fresh foods. It is so hot that unless we have ice boxes, the food spoils. You can just figure for yourself how many boxes one needs to have fresh food for all the men over here. I can't complain about the food because I think we have the best cooks there are with us. They can make the canned food really taste good.
Was in Australia for a while, and it really was an interesting place. The people were very nice to us and tried so much to make us feel at home. It took me a while to get used to the money, etc., but it was fun. Arrived here by air, and it was quite an exciting trip. The ocean looked beautiful from way up in the clouds. This place isn't too bad. I really don't mind it at all, except for the heat, and I do mean heat. Got quite a kick out of the natives here when I first saw them. Could hardly believe I was actually here and seeing them myself. Guess they felt the same way, 'cause when they saw us, they just stood and stared. And talk about mud. I never saw anything like it. Always wanted to see what a jungle looked like, but never did I expect to find myself in one.
This is one day that as I look out from this tent of mine, I'm completely satisfied. I guess the one dominant factor in my pleasure was the first shower I've enjoyed in weeks. And with it goes thanks to the ingenuity of the American soldiers. The engineers went out and acquired an Italian boxcar. I say acquired due to my previous moral beliefs. In it they set up 9 faucets. From bombed state buildings they procured marble and tiles and made a beautiful floor and walls. To this they attached a huge tank and built a heating arrangement that burns gasoline. After one glimpse into the interior boxcar, every soldier will swear that it is the finest shower room ever seen. For myself, I know it is. Life is full of such inventions out there. From wrecked German aircraft lying around, believe me, there's plenty. The boys build radios, projectors, and every possible thing to make life pleasant. Beds, tables, chairs are all constructed from packing boxes. I can furnish any house with just a few empty orange crates. We go out and grind straw and make a wonderfully soft filling for mattresses. About the greatest thing the boys made was a donut-making machine from a wrecked Jeep, that versatile vehicle. They even constructed a miniature steam shovel, which builds our foxholes, from some equipment they've obtained from a wrecked foundry.
I am now in France, safe and in one piece. France is just like our own New England states. The farms are small and rich. Most of the cattle have been taken by the Germans. In fact, there are very few left. All the men and girls have been taken to Germany to work. The cities and towns that I have seen have been leveled to the ground. The people are very friendly and glad to see the soldiers. Many that are here have been crippled. They have nothing left except what the Germans couldn't take with them. The work is done by horse with equipment like that of our forefathers. The main ways of travel are by barrow, horse, and bicycles. The houses and barns are built together and are of stone. We'll send some picture cards when permitted to use them.
I can honestly say I'm an expert on mud. All types. Soft, fudgy, kind, sticky clayish stuff. Rough, gravelly muck, or just a plain muddy hole. The first type sticks to your shoes, thus giving them the appearance of a camouflaged mud pie. When you run into the clayish type, you simply look like an old-fashioned brown jug, providing you have the proper ears for a handle. The gravelly stuff, I'm still willing to bet, is a German booby trap. Every time you hit that stuff, you're usually crawling on your hands and knees. The last and most common type is simply the old reliable splash and fall in type. Did you ever try writing a letter sitting on the edge of a box, balancing a candle, and listening to a bunch of guys arguing about who's going to open or what's the bet? I wish you were here to see what just happened. A big rat ran through the shack right among the guys playing cards with the Italian lira. He went flying in all directions. One guy smashed the heck out of another guy's toe with a wrench. I swear it was the funniest thing I've ever saw. It caused me to drop the candle.
Have been rather busy lately, doing a lot of moving around and seeing quite a bit of the Pacific area. Most of it I can't tell you about, but I can tell you that I'm in the Philippines. We made many friends out here, for they are very friendly people, and most happy to see us. We asked if they knew that we were actually coming to liberate them. "Oh yes," they would exclaim. "We knew." "How?" we asked. "We have hidden radios here and there. Late at night, when there's no interference, we listened and we hear the news." "Ah yes, we knew you were coming. They secretly laughed at the Jap claims of victory over Americans. They knew better.
We left the States on a Dutch ship that was converted into a troop ship from the freighter. The ship, or tub as we called it, was a small one. After we left Frisco Harbor and got out to sea, many of the boys got sick, and the tub was such a mess that nobody could get to the galley for 3 days to eat. We only had 2 meals a day, and they were nothing to brag about. We were on the water for about 28 days. All this time, our outfit manned 4 guns that we set up on deck to help us protect in case of an attack. We landed in New Zealand but didn't stay very long. We did a lot of hard training, of course. We had a lot of fun there too. We left New Zealand on a regular troop ship. We all were happy to have a ship where there was a little room to walk around. We had Thanksgiving dinner on this ship and enjoyed it very much. We next landed at New Caledonia and stayed there for about 3 months, which were spent training and fighting mosquitoes.
Here in India, our biggest battles are with bugs, boredom, and heat. The only protection from insects is a mosquito net and repellent. Most of us have pets of one sort or another as means of fighting boredom. At the present time, I have a young mongoose which eats just about everything, including toes and fingers. On the brighter side, we can hire a servant to make our beds, carry water, do laundry, clean boots, and what have you for what amounts to $2 a month. Our boy is a local crooner, and his following has increased enormously since we taught him pistol-packing mama.
I am on one of the smaller islands in the Philippines. It is beautiful, but a little too hot. Our area is almost on the beach, and there is very good swimming here too. The beach is almost 100 yards away from our tents. In the background, there are mountains. Most of the natives here are farmers, and us Americans have begun to try our hand at it. On days we don't fly, you can always see someone digging around his tent where he has his garden. In our gardens, we have corn, peas, everything you can imagine, even flowers. You see, there aren't many places to go here, so we just hang around and plant.
The last time I wrote, I was in Hawaii, but now I'm in Guam. What a time I had last week with the natives. I was playing my guitar and singing for the girls. Wow, are they pretty here. I am getting along fine, especially with one with long black hair, beautiful brown eyes, and a shape that can compare with Betty Grable any day.
Talking about the things that a fellow shall never forget, here are some of the things that I think I will always remember. Of course, the greatest of them is the day that our boat left New York. It was a clear day in July. As we slowly went out, the Statue of Liberty slowly faded into the background, along with the skyline of New York City. Such a sight I soon hope to see, but coming into sight, not out of. Then there was England and then France. Here, the real thing came out. Landing from an LST, the breastworks that the Germans made to try and stop the men on D-Day, the city of St. Lo, the coastal battlefields, the first time you saw a cross over a grave and an American helmet on it, the first time you saw an American boy dead, then you really know that there is a war going on. Other sights that you will long remember, a plane going down in flames and a night air raid. These things a fellow can never forget.
Letters relating personal experiences of combat tended to be written a while after the events. Those who knew Stephen Von Euw personally wrote more descriptive letters than people who wrote to Von Euw in his role as editor of the paper.
I am still a pilot on the best ship in the world, a flying fortress. The name of it is the Connecticut Yankee. Recently, in a mission somewhere over Germany, I painted a personal message from you folks back at home on one of my bombs. It read, "To Adolf Hitler from the people of Rockville, Connecticut." I can't tell you where it dropped, but I am very sure that you will be proud to know that the results were very gratifying.
Just the other day while I was on the beach, not a sandy one like home, but sharp coral, we had an air raid. From my position, I could see about all of it. Even though all the planes were high, it did my heart good to see our pilots go to fight the Japs. They did not look to see if there were too many of them to handle. They just drove into the Japs and prayed that they would come out of this scrap to handle another. I cannot say how many planes were shot down, but there were some. I could see a plane go spinning down to sea, leaving a long trail of smoke, but could not tell what kind of plane it was. One plane, though, came spinning down, and when I thought for sure it was going to crash, it pulled out. By some very good flying, put out the fire and glided over the beach where I was. I saw that it was one of ours. The pilot didn't try to jump out. Instead, he did a wonderful job of flying and landed the plane about 20 yards from shore. The pilot got out of the plane and swam to shore just as the plane sank. He will be ready to go up again tomorrow.
Flying over here is rough as far as weather is concerned. We batter the land of the Hun in weather that has the seagulls walking. I've seen his flak and his fighters and can say that they are not matched for us in the RAF. Jerry entertains us with buzz bombs, rockets, etc., but we don't lose much sleep over them. About all he does accomplish with these gadgets is to help the British farmers with their fall plowing. Cigar and cigarettes are our chief problems over here. You know my cigar consumption, and fortunately my dad has answered my SOS for something other than floor sweepings to smoke.
The night before we landed, we had just passed San Cristobal Isle when we were alerted. We all had to get below deck. We could hear everything that went on over the loudspeaker. We were told that we were being attacked by torpedo bombs. There was a lot of shooting, and we could see a lot of tracers going. Every time a plane went down, we could hear the boys on the guns cheer, but not for long, because they still had work to do. No damage was done to the convoy. Early the next morning, we dropped the anchor at the canal and started to unload the ship. We were all hoping that no Japs would come over, so the boys all worked as hard as they could. We unloaded the ship in record time. 2 days later, we left the harbor in the afternoon. Later that night, we heard a lot of explosions near us. Those were depth charges dropped by our destroyer escort. They got 3 subs around the Solomon Island. We didn't sleep that night. We landed at 3:30 in the morning, and to our surprise, we found some of our troops there. During the day, the Marines landed and met no Japs. We had to stay there for 3 days until we could take a boat to where the rest of the company was. When we got there, we set up a camp and started to set up a defense for the island. The next bit of excitement we had was when 5 Zeros came over to strafe us. It was hot for a while, but not too bad. 3 of our boys got the Purple Heart. After that raid, the Japs knew we were there, so we had a lot of bombing attacks.
When the 3rd U.S. Army, under the leadership of General Patton, crossed the Rhine, we were there and took an important part. I have read many stories about the Rhine not being a hard battle, but for my money, it was one of the hardest, like Bastogne, St. Vith, and Westwall. The river is very wide and very swift. On each bank are highways. On the east bank, a railway follows the Rhine. There are high cliffs on each side of the river. It sure was a job for the infantry. Once we had crossed, to climb and fight their way up. Once they were on top, they had airplanes ahead of them. One raft, which took equipment over, brought the wounded back to an aid station, which was on the bank of the river. A small town on the other side of the river, which the infantry could not take with the first push, hid many Germans for a few hours. The infantry went around the town, cut it off, and pushed on. Later that day, they went in and took the town, house by house. On the river, we could watch every move. We only hoped that the snipers would not pick on us. Once the town was ours, we watched the white flags coming out of the windows of the houses. Our work went on for hours after the Rhine had been crossed. Word was heard that the infantry was well on its way to the heart of Germany, but we still carried the wounded over the river to the aid station. There everything was done for the men that could be done. During one period when it was all quiet, we were eating and I had a minute or two before going back. So walking around, I passed the aid station. There was a chaplain talking with one of the fellows who, an hour or so ago, we had brought across. There also were empty boxes, which a short time ago had had life-saving blood in them. On that day, the Rhine was crossed, but many brave Americans paid a dear price and found a grave of water. No words can ever tell, in truth, how things are. You will have to see them.
I am still in Germany somewhere, but one never knows where he'll be next in the army. There are a few things I will tell you about which I saw with my own eyes, which is the truth. I have been to a concentration camp here. I saw about 300 dead Allied prisoners piled outside of a door of a furnace room, where they took and burned up these people. I looked into the furnace and saw bones and flesh of several of them burned up. And then in another room, there was a torture chamber. Also in a shower room, they had showers hooked up with gas, which made it a gas chamber. When they turned on the water, the gas would come out instead of water. Boy, let me tell you, when a fellow sees these things with his own eyes, it is altogether different than reading it or seeing it in the movies or on the radio. I'll tell you, it makes us hate the Germans all the more. So you see how us boys feel about these things over here. I sure wish I was back with my boy and all my pals. I guess we all wish the same things, but we just gotta wait it out, and then come back and hope to stay home.
The main reason why I'm writing you this letter is to tell you what I saw. It was a slave labor camp near the town of Weimar. The camp is in two sections, a war plant section and the place where people were kept. The war plant section is completely wrecked. Large watchtowers surround the entire place. There were no Germans around. They had taken off. Many people were walking around. Many of them had spent many years in the camp. We parked our truck right inside the camp and took off on foot. We passed through two large iron gates into the actual prison where 1,000 people still lived. They waited shipment to their homes or other camps to wait for passage home. The people were forced to live in wooden buildings. 100 were made to live in one building. They had very little room to stand around, but at night they slept in wood racks like loaves of bread in a baker shop. The place was very unclean. They made people work for long hours.
On March 3rd, we happened to be flying on one of the largest and highest missions that the Jolly Rogers ever had. It was a good 12.5-hour flight at the altitude of 22,000 feet. We took off before dawn in a heavy rainstorm, which is an everyday occurrence here. When we reached the target on the northern tip of Formosa, I never saw so much flak in my life. The Japs put everything up at us, but the kitchen sink. To make things worse, our ship was hit pretty bad. We lost one engine and a lot of gas. About every plane there that day got hit, but they were lucky compared to us. At first we thought we would have to bail out over the target, but we all decided to chance it and get away from Formosa. This is one place I didn't care to bail out over. No one is your friend there. We couldn't stay with the formation, so we dropped back to save as much gas as we could. After dropping back, we noticed some unidentified fighter planes trailing us, but if they were the Japs, they didn't bother us. I think we were flying the slowest that a B-24 could go and still stay up. Well, after a lot of hoping, we finally reached the northern tip of Luzon. We weren't completely out of danger, but we felt better after seeing land again. Shortly after we passed the tip, our gas began to give out. We lost another engine. At this time, we were at 2,000 feet. We had been losing altitude all the way along. We all hit the silk as the plane was going in. We all landed in the water about a mile from shore. Incidentally, this shoreline was alive with Japs, as our boys in the infantry hadn't made advances that far in Luzon at that time. You can imagine how every one of us felt. It so happened that there was a small fishing boat offshore and it began to pick the boys up. Here's the funny part of it. They were Filipino guerrillas. I didn't know this until they picked me out of the drink. I was in the water about an hour before they found me. As the boat came nearer to me, I could make out 2 red spots on the side of the boat. On these spots was some white paint. Well, from a distance, I could have sworn they were Jap flags. I had my gun out, but it wouldn't have done me much good even if they were the Japs. The salt water fixed it good. I owe my life to those guerrillas. You see, the ocean currents are fairly strong there, and they were carrying me away from the land. I tried to swim, but it wasn't any use. They are certainly a brave people. They picked up 8 of us. We were searching for other fellows when a Navy flying boat picked us up. They had been notified about us and were looking for us. Again, we searched for the 2 boys that were missing, but no luck. As yet, we have no word for them, and this happened 2 months ago. The Navy plane took us to this base. We were given some clean clothes and some ice-cold beers, which I hadn't had in quite some time. It really hit the spot after drinking a lot of salt water. They gave us a hot meal and put us up for the night. Well, since this happened, I had been flying again, and I have quite a few more missions to go.
I'm in Guam now and will soon be moving ahead to Tokyo possibly. I hope so because the sooner we hit Tokyo, the sooner this war will be over. Last week, I took a trip over to Tokyo in a B-29, and I saw the bombs rain down on the Japanese capital. You could see the fire from many miles off. I got permission to go over. It sure was a sight.
Throughout all letters, there was a common theme. Reading the journal and the What's Hot column gave the soldiers a welcome respite from the war. Some letter writers commented about local events, such as a vote to build a new recreation center. Others were avid fans of the sports teams from Rockville High School. Gerald Rock summarized the feelings of many when he wrote, "Am 9,000 miles or more away, but think of Rockville every day."
As you know, there were a few of the town boys hurt in the last battle. I hope that all the people back there are as proud of a job as they did as I am. As long as I live, I'd be proud to say that I was with the boys over there. I cannot even try to express my feelings for the boys who were there with me during that battle. They did a swell job, and everyone should be proud to say that they know them. I guess that everything will be changed by the time we get back. Maybe we'll not be recognized, the old hometown anymore. Boy, I miss it more than I can say. I never thought that I'd feel this way about it. But one cannot help but wish he was back where he spent most of his younger life. Rockville may not be the big city, but to me, it is the best.
I am still alive and finally released from the hospital. I am feeling fine and am back on the job again. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank all of the people of Rockville for remembering me during my convalescence and for the many, many cards, letters, and packages which I received while I was in the hospital. There are many more things for which we over here are grateful to you back there. I have seen your plasma save the life of more than one of my friends. Your bonds have purchased for our Air Force the best combat aircraft in the world. For all of this, I am more than thankful.
This is an item or human interest story for your newspaper, which I subscribe to. My name is Private Joseph Flasney. My home is on Burbank Road, Crystal Lake. I have a 1935 Chevrolet Coupe. Tire size 5/50/17. The car is jacked up and out of use for the duration while I am serving in the U.S. Army. Mrs. Flasney notified me this past week that some courageous and patriotic citizen entered my garage and stole the 2 rear tires and wheels from my automobile. This brave specimen no double knew that I was away defending my country and had left my wife and 2 children behind. My furlough, which is in the first 6 months that I have to see my family, starts on August 29th. I have no means of transportation. All this, of course, makes it very inconvenient for me.
I received a new copy of the journal yesterday. I can't tell you how much I appreciate your thoughtfulness. I was especially sorry to hear Howard Thompson's death. You see, we shared the same locker in high school and we were the best of friends.
Dear Steve, it's much easier writing to an old friend rather than a newspaper editor. I don't feel that I'm making an assumption by such distinction because hundreds of Rockville residents, past and present, undoubtedly think of you in the same way. Fellows like Frank Brigham, Ed Finance, and Clarence Milanese are a real loss. Although I have seen plenty of death and destruction, even seen my own buddies get it, hearing of the boys I grew up with brings much more of a personal pain. I got banged up a bit myself in a recent invasion, but 3 months in this Hawaiian hospital have brought me along pretty well. The doctors and nurses here are the best, and the Red Cross provides dozens of little services to make life brighter, especially for the patients less fortunate than I. I was happy to see that Rockville backed the Red Cross drive so well.
Someday I'll show you a book of a sort that has every little thing in it. It is quite long now, but it isn't finished yet. I left a lot of blank spaces in the story, but anyone who kept up with the news can fill them in, except for some things that can't be printed as of yet. Hope you enjoy reading this. My best to all. Now I must try to get some sleep. Got a tough day ahead of me tomorrow. Still hoping to see the hometown again. 2 years is a long time, and I know that things have changed.
Sergeant Eugene Delbene was killed in action, Luzon, Philippines, on January 19, 1945. He was 25 years old.
Dear Charlie, just a few lines to let you know that I'm well and I hope this letter finds you the same. We are security guards out here. This is our job so far until we get further notice to go home or the South Pacific. But whatever happens, I'm always thinking of you. You must be quite a boy now, or should I say a man. That would be better sounding, I know, but you still are my boy. That is all that matters. Right, Charlie? I see by the papers they want pictures of the boys overseas, so I'll take a good one and I'll send it to you, so they can put it in the paper. Okay, Charlie? Well, Charlie, I'll sign off now. Until my next letter to you with all my loving kisses, to you from your dad.
As news of the surrender of Nazi Germany spread around the world, there was joy mixed with uncertainty. Soldiers in Europe appreciated the break from fighting, but wondered if they would be sent to the Pacific Theater. Those serving in the Pacific knew that the end of the war was in sight, but recognized that subduing the Japanese Empire would require an intense commitment.
I thought I'd drop you a few lines to let you know that I was one of the POWs that was freed on April 25th, 1945. I am now in England recovering from 5 months of illness and starvation. There were a lot of us together. I was captured on 12/21/1944. We had 1 to 7 men on a loaf of bread and carrots and potato soup once a day. I flew from Germany to England, and they told us that the POWs will fly back to the States.
I'm sorry that I can't tell you where I am or much about what I'm doing. The submarine service operates in very strict secrecy. Many important missions and patrols that have already been carried out will not be known until final victory over Japan has come. I've met many veterans of such missions, and I've heard their stories. Many people will be surprised when they learn what the subs have done. Our rainy season has started. We've had a heavy shower every day for 14 days. Today, which is VE Day, the sun was bright and the air was clear, with a cool breeze blowing in from the north. Liberties were canceled, but free beer is being served in our ship's service and clubhouse. All the boys are praying for a quick victory over the Japs, so they can all get back home to stay.
We've been pulling security guard duty and have a big white SG painted on our helmets. We've been moving from town to town, and we've even guarded a large group of Jerry POWs. I don't know how I will wind up now that the war is over here in Germany. The anti-aircraft outfit I belong to has no Jerry planes to shoot at, so we'll have other things to do until our future's determined.
Dear Mrs. Weber, I received your letter seeking information concerning the death of Private First Class Leonard Barrett, Company A, 307th Infantry Regiment. The official condolence letter reads in part as follows. In the Battle of Shurik, the problems of supply were hazardous due to enemy snipers. While carrying rations to the men of his platoon on May 22nd, Leonard was seriously wounded. He was given immediate aid and sent to the aid station, where he died after every effort was made to save his life. His courage and aggressiveness in combat was always an inspiration to the officers and men of his company. He is buried in grave 526, row 16, plot 1, in the beautiful U.S. Army Cemetery on Okinawa. Leonard was given a Catholic and military burial. I gave my men every opportunity to be prepared spiritually for death. The men know the danger and were well prepared to face it. Your loss is our loss, for we miss our buddies. They are not forgotten. As we welcome peace, we know that it is sacrifices such as Leonard's that made it possible for us to once more return to the ones we love. He made the supreme sacrifice, because of his loved ones, his home, his country, and his God. You certainly loved Leonard as a son. He was a fine lad. Comfort his wife to whom I have just written. It must be a terrible blow for her. Keep praying for us. May God bless you. With deepest sympathy, Daniel J. Hunt, Chaplain, 307th Infantry.
I arrived in Boston on the USS Wakefield on Saturday, June 16th. I will be hospitalized somewhere in Massachusetts until I recover from an illness I contracted overseas. I hope to be back home in town sometime in the near future. I want to thank you for the copies of the journal I received while overseas. I had many minutes of enjoyment from them. Reading of the different changes going on in town and about where the different boys were scattered around the world. Many of them will never come back to Rockville. Some of them will come back, but they will be broken down men. I've been to about 5 different hospitals, and I have seen enough to convince me that these men must be given every consideration when they get back home. I hope things don't last much longer in the Pacific, so all the boys can get to the States again. It sure is a great feeling to be back here.
Today was proclaimed a day of Thanksgiving in the Navy. When word got around that Japan had surrendered, the ship turned into a mass of singing, yelling, jumping, and happy fellows. Yep, we couldn't believe it, but we sure went off the handle. I can just imagine the celebration in Rockville.
News of the Jap surrender came here last Thursday afternoon and was joyously received. A group of men working on a construction job across from the Quasnet hut where I work immediately broke into cheering. They left the job, without obtaining approval from the union steward, to celebrate in whatever manner they could find. No nightclubs or oyster bars were open where the boys could find an outlet for their jollification. The celebrating was done mostly in cheering and drinking ice water and Coke. The most important question, which all are asking one another, is, when are we going home?
We will end with the words of a writer not from Rockville or Vernon, but one who spoke for all of those who served in this war. Ernie Pyle was a Pulitzer Prize-winning war correspondent. In a memorable column, he wrote to those waiting at home. He wanted to describe how military service and the experience of combat had changed their soldiers. He asked families and society to understand, accept, and honor the impact of these experiences as they prepared to welcome their soldiers home. August 1944, somewhere in France. Thousands of our men will be returning to you after Europe. They have been gone a long time, and they've seen and done and felt things you cannot know. They will be changed. They will have to learn how to adjust themselves to peace. Last night, we had a violent electrical storm around our countryside. The storm was half over before we realized that the flashes and the crashings around us were not artillery, but plain old-fashioned thunder and lightning. It will be odd to hear only thunder again. You must remember that such little things as that are in our souls, and it will take time. And all of us together will have to learn how to reassemble our broken world into a pattern so firm and so fair that another great war cannot soon be possible. To tell the simple truth, most of us over in France don't pretend to know the right answer. Submersion in war does not necessarily qualify a man to be the master of peace. All we can do is fumble and try once more. Try out of the memory of our anguish, and be as tolerant with each other as we can.